We are learning new details about Prime Minister Trudeau's meeting with President-elect Trump just days after the President-elect threatened a 25% tariff on goods from Canada. The dinner took place at Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach, Florida. Public Safety Minister Dominic LeBlanc and Trudeau's Chief of Staff Katie Telford were also at the table, along with some key Trump cabinet appointees, Howard Lutnick, Doug Burgum, and Mike Waltz. In a social media post, Trump described it as a, quote, very productive meeting where they discussed many important topics that will require both countries to work together to address, including the fentanyl crisis, illegal immigration, and trade. In his own post on X, Trudeau said he looked forward to the work both leaders can do together. Sources tell CBC News that while there was no guarantee tariffs are off the table, the Prime Minister and his team left the meeting feeling hopeful that a solution is attainable. So how big a deal was this in-person meeting, and what's next in the negotiations with Trump? Everett Eissenstat served in Trump's first administration as Deputy Director of the White House National Economic Council. He was also Trump's Deputy Assistant for International Economic Affairs. Everett Eissenstat, good morning. Thanks for being here.
Oh, good morning. Nice to be with you this morning.
And even better to have you on this Sunday, given what happened Friday night, Canada's Prime Minister flying to Mar-a-Lago to have dinner with the U.S. President-elect, following those threats of tariffs. And we'll talk more about that. But I do want to get your perspective on how important you think it was for Justin Trudeau to make that visit and have that dinner with the President-elect right now.
Oh, it was really important. One of the things that is fairly unique about President Trump is how much he values personal relationships. And I think the willingness of the Prime Minister Trudeau to fly down to Mar-a-Lago and meet with him personally is a very significant move, and one that I think was appreciated.
So we understand that Trump didn't say, forget it, I'm not going to go ahead with 25% tariffs. But there was a sense that there was a little bit of hope and optimism that maybe they can get there. Maybe I can just get your perspective on why Donald Trump is so, and some of the people around him, so committed to the idea of tariffs, why he thinks that is really an important policy approach.
Sure. Yeah, well, Rosemary, I think that the president really recognizes how powerful tariffs can be. And, we've had a really open economy for decades, and our tariff rates are fairly low. He's found that tariffs can be a very significant motivator to get economies to move in a direction that he thinks is beneficial to the United States. So I think he really believes in the power of tariffs. And they can be used in different ways. For example, I think here we've got more of a negotiation approach to the use of tariffs. These are, I think, committed toward a very specific fact pattern, which is, the border security. But he also talked about tariffs in different ways as well.
So tell me why you think that this is about possibly something more than just trade. Certainly in his social media posts, he's talked about fentanyl, he's talked about migration. What do you think he's actually trying to get out of this threat?
Well, I think he's trying to solve some of the longstanding problems that we've seen, globally. And one of them is, migration patterns have been very, very extreme for quite some time. I suspect, and I read that there were some caravans forming in southern Mexico, and perhaps he'd seen an article or heard about that and wanted to take some actions, even though he's not yet in office, to try to stop the caravans from crossing the border before he took office on January 20th. So I think this is part of a bigger picture that he's trying to reorient, really, empower the United States to achieve some things that he believes are very important.
Do you think that 25% tariffs on a country like Canada, your closest trading partner, makes sense, given the impact that it would also have on the American economy?
Well, again, tariffs, it depends on how they're used. And one of the things that we debated aggressively, candidly, during the first administration was, okay, if you're going to use tariffs, how should they be used and how should they be used effectively? So I think as a negotiating tool, tariffs can be very, very effective. As a matter of economic policy, it's going to reorient supply chains. And there's a trade-off between, efficiency and resilience. And perhaps tariffs can help, manage that. So it really depends on what your objective is as to how effective they can be.
One of the things that Trump's nominee for Treasury, Scott Bessent, said in a column for Fox News recently was that Donald Trump can also use this as a negotiating tactic when it comes to foreign policy. And in this case, I think the objective would be getting Canada to spend more in defense to meet that 2% GDP. That wasn't mentioned from what we understand on social media, nor am I sure that it was mentioned at the dinner. But is that also possible, that this is about sort of pushing Canada in a direction on that front as well?
I do think that, Rosemary, and I think there's a number of issues that the president would like to see, move in a different direction. And one of the things that's really unique about this president is that he is not limited to the trade lane. I think that's pretty clear. Yeah. And traditionally, trade policies like, trade for trade, and this opens up a whole new aperture of issues that could be under discussion, including foreign policy, NATO funding and things like that. So I think it really does. It is a transformational way to think about trade, and one that's going to have, I think, pretty important impacts.
Well, one of the concerns I think that was caused in this country after that social media post was also the lumping of Canada and Mexico together. And it has led some premiers in this country, the Premier of Ontario notably, to ask the question whether this trade agreement with Canada and Mexico and the United States makes sense, or whether we should cut Mexico loose. What do you think of that, either in terms of a trade position, but also in terms of a negotiating position with Donald Trump?
I think it's fascinating. Canada was one of the very first trade agreements the U.S. ever had, and I've watched the evolution of trade policy all the way from that period to where we are today. And the idea that we'd kind of revert back to a bilateral trading arrangement is very interesting, particularly since the USMCA, I think you call it the Canada-Mexico.
We do, yeah.
Here it's the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement, so USMCA. So it's up for review this year. There's definitely going to be some discussion about whether it's serving its purpose or not. Whether that results in a bilateral type of arrangement, I don't know. And I think that one of the big economic impetus behind this idea of a North American trading bloc was to enable the bloc to compete more effectively with other regions of the world. Does that make sense today? I don't know. It's something we'll have to discuss. But regardless of whether you go into this trilateral or bilateral dialogue, there is only so much ability of the president to actually enter into an agreement and get it approved by Congress. So there are limitations on how far you can move without going to Congress. And that's something I think, people should keep in mind, that this is very difficult. It's hard to negotiate. It's hard to get approved. It's hard to implement. So we need to be careful and not, just open up everything and say, okay, this is going to be easy. Let's just do this bilaterally. Yeah. That being said, Rosemary, I do think it's an important concept that there are areas where bilateral interaction may make more sense. Now, can they be, alongside the USMCA or on top of course? And I think that bilateral dialogue can be very, very important.
Let me end on this in terms of you seem to think that the visit down to Mar-a-Lago, the dinner, was important. I would agree. But as someone that knows Donald Trump and has worked for him, what advice would you give to the Canadian government right now as it sort of gets ready to see if it can prevent these tariffs and how it's going to interact with the president a second time?
Well, I think, I was actually in the G7 negotiations in Canada at the end of those. You may recall they did not end well. And so, again, it did not end well. Not because, it was some interactions among senior leaders that really didn't go well. I think, again, the lesson here, and I think we're seeing it across the globe, is that personal relationships matter, and being dismissive or condescending about these concerns isn't going to work. And so there needs to be real engagement and real efforts to try to work collaboratively to resolve these problems, which we do share. And so I think the visit was important. I think hopefully it's the start of a very good conversation. I think it's going to take a while. President Trump isn't going to be in office until January 20th, and we're only here at the 1st of December. So we have a ways to go yet. But it was a very interesting weekend for sure. And I think a relationship that I'll be watching very, very closely.
Everett Eissenstat, so great to have you this morning. Thank you, sir.
Such a pleasure, Rosemary. Thank you so much.